Alright guys, today we're going to look at solving single variable equations. Single variable equations is kind of the basis for a lot of algebra. It's basically using information that you know to solve for what you don't. And so I've got 4 little examples here, and then we're going to look at another one here in just a minute. The basic idea behind solving any variable equation is getting that variable isolated, getting it by itself. So in this case I used x for my variables. So you need x by itself. And the basic principles of doing that are anything that's on the same side of your equal sign as your variable, you want to move to the other side using different properties and rules that are in place. Where it kind of begins is basically the 4 basic functions in math you do, which are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. You look at what's happening to the variable, and then you would do the opposite of what's happening. So looking at the first one here, I've got x plus 3 equals 5. The 3 is being added. It's on the same side of the equal sign as x. So I'm going to do the opposite of addition, which is subtraction, to get that to the other side. But a basic principle is this: anything that you do to one side of an equation, you have to do to the other. So if I'm going to subtract 3 from the left side of my equal sign, I'm also going to subtract 3 from the right side of my equal sign. And so I'm going to see what that leaves me with. It leaves me with an x. 3 minus 3 is 0, which is what I wanted. X is now by itself, and 5 minus 3 is 2. And so my solution there is x equals 2. Kind of moving down, you look at x minus 2 equals 9. The 2 is being subtracted. Need to get it to the other side of the equal sign, so I do the opposite of subtraction, which is addition. And again, I have to do that to both sides. I'm left with x equals 11. And so that's kind of where it all begins when it comes to algebra, pre-algebra. Looking at my next part here, I've got 3x equals 12. That 3 is being multiplied by the x. So to get it to the other side of my equal sign, I do the opposite of multiplication, which is division, which again I have to do to both sides. So that cancels my 3 out. I am left with x equals 4. And so as you can see, there is my solution. And then looking at the other part, it's a fraction, which many people tend to forget that's just a division problem. X here is being divided by 4. So to get it to the other side, I do the opposite of subtraction, or excuse me, the opposite of division, which is multiplication. And so you multiply both sides by 4. On the left side, that cancels and leaves me with just my x. 11 times 4 is 44. And so you can see you can solve for x that way. Now these are obviously very simplistic examples. These equations can continue to get more complex. Other properties, distributive property, things like that can be added into the mix. And so these do tend to get a little more complicated. Here's a version of one that's a little bit more, I got a little bit more going on. And I'm seeing a typo I've got now. That should be an x here, not a y. So because this is a single variable equation. So what I've got here, I've got a couple of x's, I've got some things to distribute, things like that. So I'm going to start off by distributing the 5 into my set of parentheses. That just means multiplying that 5 by each thing inside the parentheses. So 5 times 2x gives me 10x, and then 5 times 8 gives me 40. I still have this plus 3x, and it is equal to 1. And again, all of what we do when we're solving single variable equations is heading to the direction of I want to end up with x by itself. And so now I'm going to combine my like terms. I have a 10x plus 3x. Those add up to be 13x. Okay? And then that's still plus 40 equals 1. Then again, I'm going to begin that process. I'm moving everything away from the x. The 40 is being added, so I'm going to subtract 40 from both sides. That leaves me with 13x is equal to negative 39. And then my final step, since 13 is being multiplied into the x, I'm going to go ahead and divide it. And so that leaves me with x equals negative 3. So the bottom line, on these single variable equations, always keep the end in mind, the end being that you want that x, or whatever that variable is, by itself. And so you're going to apply properties and different rules and things you're going to pick up in order to solve and get that x by itself. The other thing I always tell my students, and it's one of the most important things that I think a young algebra student could learn, when you get to this point where you've solved for x, you've arrived at a value, take that and plug it back into your equation in every spot that there is that variable. And so it would look like this: 5 times 2 times -3 plus 8 plus 3 times -3 equals 1. And then if you were to work out and calculate this by hand, you would end up with 1 equals 1, which is a true statement. And that tells you that this is a solution. And so once you calculate your answer, you know that you've got it correct. You verified that that is correct. And so you know that's your solution.